Hey guys, I just got back from a week-long archery hunt in the Bighorn Mountains of Wyoming. Now, right off the bat, I want to tell you, you would maybe consider this hunt unsuccessful. If you were looking for kill shots of mule deer and elk, you're not going to get it. This is going to be more of a video journal of the fun that we had chasing stuff around those mountains. Now, I say we for a couple of reasons. First of all, I am a non-resident now. I used to hunt out here all the time. I'm no longer a resident and I was unable to draw a tag this year. So my hunting buddies that I hunted with all the time are still living out there and they drew tags. Three guys had mule deer tags, one of them had an elk tag. So I went out back to my favorite spot on planet Earth to help these guys try to get a critter on the ground. I have spent all kinds of time running around this part of the world. We were doing the math on this and I figure I spent 8 or 9 seasons running around this general area, really figuring things out. I chased deer all the time. I had this elk tag a couple of times. Man, did I have fun, and I learned a ton. The interesting thing is that my first morning ever hunting elk, I shot an elk out of this spot. And when it was all done, the pack out was miserable. The pack out was grueling. But killing an elk, I thought, well, this isn't so hard. Of course, that was all thanks to my mountain hunting mentor, who expertly called that elk to easy bow range, and I still nearly botched the shot. 4 more years went by before I shot my next elk. And I had this tag a number of times, and I chased a lot of little ones, a lot of big ones. I was not picky. I was going to shoot the first thing that I could launch an arrow at. And it took a long time before the stars aligned and I got another one. Mule deer is a different story. No, it's more of the same story. Mule deer in this area there are a lot of them, but they don't necessarily grow big ones. So if you're thinking you're going to go and shoot a giant monster, you're not going to do that. If you're going to have a lot of fun and try to launch arrows, this was the spot for us. We weren't that picky. We wanted opportunity. And I stalked and stalked and stalked. For the last 10 years, I put stalks on deer, and it wasn't until the last year that I still lived there that I finally connected with one. And I was all alone on the top of a mountain, and it was outstanding, and I've never been more excited about one of my accomplishments than that. But this is not a story about me, necessarily. This is a story about going back to Wyoming, enjoying that countryside, and having fun with my friends.
Okay, now show me sassy. Now scared.
There was actually a new guy on this hunt. A friend of one of my hunting buddies came up from Missouri. He had never hunted in the mountains before, and he came up to see what this was all about. And we'd kind of bragged to him about how great our spot was as far as numbers, and unfortunately, we just didn't see that this year. There wasn't an early snowfall, the weather was hot, the drought was going on, there were fires in the west. All of this stuff we think went together to just kind of keep the animals from being where we're used to seeing the animals. So all that to say, this guy still put on about 2 stalks a day while I was out there. There were enough critters that he still got some action, just not what we were used to. So the 3 of us who are sort of veterans of the area were pretty disappointed, but this new guy was just fired up and he had all sorts of stuff that he got to go play with. One of the most exciting things I've ever really been close to was the 4 of us set out hiking over a hill into a spot that we knew about, but the critters weren't where they were supposed to be, so let's go check out this new country. We immediately turned up a pretty good-sized 4-corn mule deer, and we turned the Missouri guy loose on that, said, go up around the hill here, you'll cut him off, good deal. And we cut down the hill below him to try to go and see what was happening. And just as we kind of crested this hill, there were 4 bull elk climbing up out of this big, deep drainage that we were on top of. And all of a sudden the story twisted and we started trying to chase these elk. Well, the elk just kept going. No idea why they were going or how far they went. They're gone. We find the Missouri guy again and we start looking for deer again. We found them just over the crest of the hill, but instead of 1, there's now 4. So in this footage, you can see we set him around this cliff face. The deer already have us spotted, and he's creeping up over the edge of the cliff to try to get a shot. And he's too close. He needed to go past them and get an eye on him and come back. And he got too close. They're already spooky because of us. And then they hear a rock crumble just over the top and they blow out. But man, was that fun. The way the sunlight was hitting all those deer. That was just a really, really cool thing to do. And I should point out, in all the years that I've gone out hunting out here, I've worked very, very hard to shoot my own stuff, and I've never been around to watch the other guys do their stuff. I'm always off doing my own thing, or they're doing their own thing. I've never been able to spectate like this before, and it was so much fun to actually see this hunt unfold in front of me. It didn't work, but it was awesome to watch. We figured we were probably too early for the rut, because there was maybe 1 or 2 bulls that were bugling like crazy, and there were other hunters who were bugling like crazy. But the bulls that had cows weren't the big herd bulls that you would expect to have that many cows. So I don't think the rut was even in full swing when this was going on. So the elk just really weren't around, but there were a few, and we were able to put a few stalks on them here and there. There were a couple of pretty good bulls that we were looking at, but again, my buddy not very picky on the size. I think he shot a spike last year, so he was happy to try to shoot at anything that was a branch antlered bull. He put a couple of stalks on, he had some close calls. This group of cows and 1 decent bull just decided to leave the area when he got into it. They were going downhill to water, and he was trying to call them back with a cow call. And when he decided it didn't work, he just sort of leaned up against a rock to kill a little bit of time and feel out what was going on. And before he could do anything about it, a 4x4 bull came sprinting at him through the timber and locked up the brakes and stopped at him about 8 yards away. Nothing he could do there. If he twitched a finger, that bull was going to be gone, so he just sit there, had a stare down with it, and he left. That was probably the closest call we had with an elk while we were up there, except for the very last night, the same 4-point was down in the same piece of timber, and the whole herd that he was with was gone, so he was really looking for friends at that point. And there was a cold front blowing in, and while I was up on the cliffs trying to help spot this, film this a little bit, and give them hand signals as to whatever I think was going on, this cold breeze blew up my back, and I started shivering, so I put on every piece of clothes I had in my pack at the time, and I never warmed back up. They figured the bull was gone, so they came back up the hill, and then we found the bull again. So this time I went down the hill with the guy who had the elk tag, and I tried to be the caller and get that elk to come in with him. Now, because I was already cold and that cold front was still blowing through, it was nasty down there. I ended up underneath a pine tree calling this elk towards us, and he was somewhere around this knob nearby. And through this series of events, he ends up underneath the tree with me, and he's shaking so hard. He says, "Mark, I can't stop shaking." And I'm looking at the broadhead on the end of his arrow, and it's moving about 6 inches up and down as he's shaking so hard. So this was a tricky, tricky situation. We end up getting the bull into about 53 yards, And in the act of drawing, that elk is turning away, but it wasn't turned far enough away to not see him draw, and then he got spooky. Then the bull ran off to 80, 100 yards and just sat there and barked at us and barked at us. And he really wanted to come back. We had him convinced that there were elk around, but the light faded on us. We were out of legal shooting light and never got him back in. And at that point, I was so cold that it took me the entire hike back out to camp to warm back up, even wearing all of my clothes. So that was kind of it for the elk hunting on this hunt. Now, I mentioned that it was kind of slow compared to what we're used to. When you're halfway through a week-long hunting trip and the boredom starts to set in, that's when good quality hunting buddies really show what they're worth. The boredom turns into silliness and comic relief, and you just start to have a lot of fun even though you're not really accomplishing what you're setting out to do. So take a quick look at the level of silliness and joy that comes from it when you have the right people that you're hunting with.
Do it again. Do it again. Okay, well. All right, David Attenborough, tell me about what we just saw here.
What you just witnessed was the modern day enactment of the Albatross, starring Burt Franchel and his high-flying antics. Started out as a romantic comedy, really turned into a tragedy quickly.
How did the critics feel about his portrayal?
I feel like the critics really were hard on him as far as the accuracy of the arm pump really wasn't there on the Olympic scale. Probably a -17 actually. So not much to be excited about, but in the end everyone cried and it was really quite noteworthy. So I give it sour grapes.
Join us after the break when we interview the performer himself and see how he feels about all the backlash.
Hey Kelly, guess what else I got? A whisk.
It's an amazing whisk. Brett also has the shiniest ladle on the hill. And everybody knows a shiny ladle equates to a great hunting camp.
Why do you always have to be such a prick about my cooking utensils?
And we're back. We're here with the performer himself. Burt Franchel, how do you feel about all the scathing reviews?
Pigeonholed. That's all.
Please let the folks know what it was that you were emulating, Burt Franchel.
No.
Some say that it was less of an albatross and more of a puddle duck.
Supposed to be grousey.
And what emotions were you trying to portray with this grouse performance?
You gotta give me like a heads up. I have nothing.
Deer.
A female deer.
Great.
A drop of golden sun. La la la.
Burt Franchel, after 10 long years, you're reprising your role as the Albatross in the off Broadway play by the same name. Your agent is calling it your comeback, but the critics are, well, they're calling it a stay home. What do you have to say about that?
Deer.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Deer. Saved by the deer.
Oh,
Come on.
That was really good, Mark.
ladies, I have nothing witty to come even. Yep, nothing.
Now, the last thing I want to point out is we did have a little bit of hunting success. You can take grouse, and we ran into so many grouse.
If I hit it, I'm not sure it's gonna come down.
Aim for the head.
I think I'm gonna aim center mass.
Now, we aren't just up there shooting grouse as an opportunistic thing. It's not shooting grouse for the sake of shooting grouse. Grouse is delicious. It is my very favorite way to have a camp meal. We take these back, we fry them up in some potato chips and eat them that way, or you cook them up and add them to a freeze-dried pasta dish, and they are unbelievably good. That really is the end of my 2021 Wyoming hunt. I didn't hunt myself. I did take one shot at one grouse, but the guy from Missouri lent me his bow, and he must have about a half-mile draw length because I was anchored somewhere near the back of my head, and I missed that bird by about an inch. So it was a clean miss. I lost the arrow. I still probably owe him about 20 bucks for the broadhead and the arrow that's sitting down the mountain somewhere. But I got to say I hunted grouse in Wyoming in 2021. I'm very excited to have been out there. It refreshed my soul to be back out to my favorite place on earth and to spend time with some of my favorite people. I've got other hunts planned. Waterfowl season is starting in 3 days from the time I'm recording this. I've got a South Dakota pheasant hunt coming up. I've got a lot of stuff I'm excited about this fall. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please let me know what you thought. I'm gonna try to keep this stuff rolling out. And yeah, thanks for watching.